March 12 was the long-desired date for the reoccupation and use of Scapa as the main base of the home fleet. I thought I would give myself the treat of being present on this occasion in our naval affairs, and embarked accordingly in Admiral Forbes's flagship at the Clyde. The fleet comprised 5 capital ships, a cruiser squadron, and perhaps a score of destroyers. The 20-hour voyage lay through the Minches. We were to pass the northern straits at dawn and reach Scapa about noon. The Hood and other ships from Rosyth, moving up the east coast, would be there some hours before us. The navigation of the Minches is intricate, and the northern exit barely a mile wide. On every side are rocky shores and reefs, and 3 U-boats were reported in these enclosed waters. We had to proceed at high speed and by zigzag. All the usual peacetime lights were out. This was therefore a task in navigation which the Navy keenly appreciated. However, just as we were about to start after luncheon, the master of the fleet, navigating officer of the flagship, on whom the prime and direct responsibility lay, was suddenly stricken by influenza. So a very young-looking lieutenant, who was his assistant, came up onto the bridge to take charge of the movement of the fleet. I was struck by this officer, who without any notice had to undertake so serious a task, requiring such perfect science, accuracy, and judgment. His composure did not entirely conceal its satisfaction. I had many things to discuss with the Commander-in-Chief, and it was not till after midnight that I went up onto the bridge. All was velvet black. The air was clear, but no stars were to be seen, and there was no moon. The great ship ploughed along at about 16 knots. One could just see the dark mass astern of the following battleship. Here were nearly 30 vessels steaming in company and moving in order with no lights of any kind except their tiny stern lights, and constantly changing course in accordance with the prescribed anti-U-boat ritual. It was 5 hours since they had had any observation of the land or the heavens. Presently the Admiral joined me, and I said to him, "Here is one of the things I should be very sorry to be made responsible for carrying out. How are you going to make sure you will hit the narrow exit from the Minches at daylight?" "What would you do, sir," he said, "if you were at this moment the only person who could give an order?" I replied at once, "I should anchor and wait till morning." "Anchor, Hardy," as Nelson said. But the Admiral answered, "We have nearly 100 fathoms of water beneath us now." I had, of course, complete confidence I gained over many years in the Navy. And I only tell this tale to bring home the marvelous skill and precision with which what seemed to landsmen to be impossible feats of this kind are performed as a matter of course when necessary. It was 8 o'clock before I awoke, and we were in the broad waters north of the Minches, steering round the western extremity of Scotland towards Scapa Flow. We were perhaps half an hour steaming from the entrance to Scapa when a signal reached us saying that several German aircraft had dropped mines in the main entrance we were about to use. Admiral Forbes thereupon decided that he must stand out to the westward for 24 hours until the channel had been reported clear, and on this the whole fleet began to change its course. "I can easily put you ashore in a destroyer if you care to transship," he said. "The Hood is already in harbour and can look after you." As I had snatched these 3 days from London with difficulty, I accepted this offer. Our baggage was rapidly brought on deck, the flagship reduced her speed to 3 or 4 knots, and a cutter, manned by 12 men in their life belts, was lowered from the davits. My party was already in it, and I was taking leave of the Admiral when an air raid alarm sounded, and the whole ship flashed into activity, and all the ack-ack batteries were manned and other measures taken. I was worried that the ship should have had to slow down in waters where we knew there were U-boats, but the Admiral said it was quite all right, and pointed to 5 destroyers which were circling round her at high speed, while a 6th waited for us. We were a quarter of an hour rowing across the mile that separated us from our destroyer. It was like in the olden times, except that the sailors had not so much practice with the oars. The flagship had already regained her speed and was steaming off after the rest of the fleet. before we climbed on board. All the officers of the destroyer were at their action stations, and we were welcomed by the surgeon, who took us into the wardroom where all the instruments of his profession were laid out on the table, ready for accidents. But no air raid occurred, and we immediately proceeded at high speed into Scalpa. We entered through Swither Sound, which is a small and subsidiary channel, and was not affected by the mine dropping. "This is the tradesmen's entrance," said Thompson, my flag commander. It was, in fact, the one assigned to the storeships. "It's the only one," said the destroyer lieutenant stiffly, "that the flotillas are allowed to use." To make everything go well, I asked him if he could remember Kipling's poem about mines reported in the fairway, warn all traffic and detain, sent up, and here I let him carry on, which he did correctly. Unity, Clarabelle, Assyrian, Stormcock, and Golden Gale. We soon found our way to the Hood, where Admiral Whitworth received us, having gathered most of his captains, and I passed a pleasant night on board before the long round of inspections which filled the next day. This was the last time I ever set foot upon the Hood, although she had nearly 2 years of war service to perform before her destruction by the Bismarck in 1941. More than 6 months of constant exertion and the highest priorities had repaired the peacetime neglect. The 3 main entrances were defended with booms and mines, and 3 additional block ships, among others, had already been placed in Kirk Sound, through which Priam's U-boat had slipped to destroy the Royal Oak. Many more block ships were yet to come. A large garrison guarded the base and still growing batteries. We had planned for over 120 ack guns, with numerous searchlights and a balloon barrage to command the air over the fleet anchorage. Not all these measures were yet complete, but the air defenses were already formidable. Many small craft patrolled the approaches in ceaseless activity, and 2 or 3 squadrons of Hurricane fighters from the airfields in Caithness could be guided to an assailant in darkness or daylight by one of the finest radar installations then in existence. At last the home fleet had a home. It was the famous home from which in the previous war the Royal Navy had ruled the seas.